In this tutorial, we are starting a state machine animation system for Unity, where we will manage animation states like idle, move, charge, attack, and player detection in a clean and scalable way. This is part 1, and today we are focusing on the foundation. I will walk you through the three core classes: the entity, the state, and the state machine, and explain how they work together to initialize state and switch between them smoothly. I will show you the state flow diagram so you clearly understand how transition like idle to move to player detected, and attack or charge actually work in practice. Quick thanks to Sontai for joining my Patreon membership. If you are interested, you can join too for exclusive benefits. I also have Unity and C# Udemy courses linked in the description. So let's jump right into it and let's get started.
I'm gonna show you the diagram first, that how many classes we're gonna have and how we can just move between them. So I will head over to my diagram. You can see I have a entity class, state, and the state machine. So let me explain. We will create a entity class, and this script just gonna sit on any game object. So we will have multiple enemies. This entity class just gonna sit all of them, and this state class right over here, it will be the parent. And from this state class we just gonna inherit. Let's suppose we just want to attack. Let's suppose we want to work, and the list just goes on like detecting, charge. So this will be the this state class will be the parent one, and this state class just gonna hold like when we started entered the state. Like let's suppose we just idling. So when we started idling, so we will just gonna create a parameter for it, and this class state class just gonna have all of the things in every enemy game object just gonna have. So this will be the parent one, and from this we're gonna inherit, means that we just gonna access all of our properties from this state class, and because we're gonna have idle state, work state, detect state, and the charge state, and also we will have attack state, then melee state, or for simplifying, and just I just made one state, which is the attack one. And also we're gonna have a loop for player, and we will switch between these classes or this state, you can simply assume. And we have a state machine script, and this state machine script will be responsible for switching state. Like let's suppose once our this boss enemy somewhere at the end of the ground, that means we just want to play the idle state. Means we just want to enter it idle, and then after like few seconds our enemy needs to flip, and after flipping we just want to move over to move state, means that our enemy need to move or need to patrol around this ground. So this state machine will be responsible for switching our state, and this state will be the parent or the main state, where we just gonna inherit or just gonna take all of the properties from this state class to create our idle state, work state, and the detect, and the list just goes on. And we're gonna have this entity class, and it's gonna sit on any game object. It will sit on every game object, every single game object of our enemy. So let's create them to just to keep it clear. Let's go over to Unity editor. To create them, I will move over to my project tab, assets, then move over to your script folder. So I will suggest you to create a separate folder for your state or for this state machine. So go over to assets, right click, then create, and call it some create a folder, call it a script. Then move over to your script folder, right click, create, and then a folder, and you can call it state. I already created is a folder called underscore script, and if I double click on it, I created a entity class, and I'm going to double click on it, and you can see we just created this class entity, since it's gonna attach to every single game object of our enemy. So I'm not gonna remove this mono behavior and this column and this one, because if we remove this, it's not gonna sit on a game object of our enemy. So we're just gonna leave it as it is, and we're gonna create an empty script. So basically move over to that script folder once again, then right click, create, then go over to scripting, and then click on this empty script, because this is script not gonna sit on a game object. So if I double click on it, this is an empty class, and this state class just gonna have all of the properties that every game object needs to have. So this one will be the parent, and also we created a state machine script. So if I open that up, so this not gonna sit on an game object. So that is the reason I just remove it, the start, update, and then mono behavior and all of those things. And this script will be responsible for switching our state, like when we need to switch over to our idle state. So we want to move, first thing I just want to initialize a move state. Means in the start of the game I want this enemy to move. So initially I just want to I want to start with my move state, and once our enemy at the end of the ground something over here, then I just want to enter it inside my idle state. Means that it's need to play the idle. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it. And now let's do the scripting. So I'm gonna open up my state script by double clicking on it, and this state script just gonna have some function. So we're gonna make this one public, and we making it public because we just want to inherit from this state class. Means whatever we're gonna do inside this state, when we inheriting, means that when we gonna create subscript of this script, that subscript also just gonna have all of the properties of this state class. So that is the reason we just made it public, so we can access in our inherited classes. And we're gonna make this one virtual. Virtual means that top of if we inherit and then we just want to do some custom things once again inside this function later on, then we need to mark as virtual, because I'm gonna modify later what we really need to do inside this function, and we have to name this. So let's call it something like enter, then make first bracket and some curly brackets. So make sure you just type void for function you need to type, and we just made it public virtual void enter. That means that we can modify this function later on inside our inherited class. Like we're gonna create a ideal state class, we're gonna have move state class, so we can reuse this function later on. So let's create another function to exit our state, because if we exit our state, then we can enter to another state like moving, attacking, or idling. So we're gonna make another public virtual. That means we can reuse the function void, and we're gonna call it exit state, just like that. And let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and you can use this state once again inside this enter state instead of calling simply enter. And also we're gonna have two more function, three more, you can simply assume three more function. One will be the physics update, and another will be the logic update. Means that we need to move our enemy every single frame to the left or right direction. So we're gonna create a logic update which just gonna take off that it's gonna take responsibility of moving our enemy every single time to the left right direction, attacking, and all of those things. So we're going to create a logic update, and we need to call this function inside our update function, and we do know that update function runs every single frame. So if I move over to my enemy one script, we basically want to call the function somewhere around here. So that function will be called every single frame. Means that every single frame we want to move our enemy. So I hope you get the idea. So let's navigate to our state class once again. So let's make a public virtual void, means we can reuse virtual void, and we have to name this. So let's call this one logic update. I'm gonna call it logic update. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and let's make one more function for our physics update, and we will call this physics update function inside our fixed update, which call every single frame with a fixed frame rate. So we're gonna make a another public virtual void, and let's call this one physics update, just like that. Sorry, physics update, physics update. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and let's make one more function which will do the checking. We just want to call that function inside this logic update, as well as when we're gonna enter our state, enter our state. So we're gonna create a do checks function, and it's necessary to do, because if we don't do it, then we have to do inside this enter state function, and then we have to do inside this logic update over again and again, and you're gonna understand later on. So for now we're just gonna create the function right away. So we will create a public virtual void, or we can just simply make this void, because we basically we just don't want to use this function, reuse this function in our inherited classes. So we can simply just make this function public void instead of making public virtual void, because we're not gonna reuse this function at all. And we can call this one do checks, and it's gonna do the all the checking things. If our we're gonna shoot out a ray from this enemy to the down direction, so that function just gonna responsible to do these things, like shooting out the ray every single frame. So that is the reason we're gonna call inside our logic update, because we want to call this logic update function every single frame inside that update function. So this function just gonna do that thing, which is do checks. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and make sure you call this do checks function inside this logic update, and once you iterate the a state, so we're gonna call this do checks function inside our logic update. So let's call it there, do checks, make first bracket and close that up with semicolon, and then call the function once again when we just gonna enter our state. So let's call the function there as well, which is our do checks, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we will create a constructor for this. Constructor, you can think of that it's a box which gonna already contains some tools. It can be eraser, it can be scissors or anything just like that, or tapes, you can assume. So basically what you constructor basically is special type of function, and we just need to name it as the name of our class. So first thing, we need to make it public, and we have to type the name of the class, which is our state, and then we need to make this first bracket, and we need to make this curly brackets. And this state, we just created this function, sorry, not function, basically this is constructor. And constructor basically is special type of function, and I already explained it that it's a box, it's gonna contain already, it's gonna contain some tools. You can take a example of like scissors, you can take a example of like sellotape tapes, or whatever, like photos, or just like that. So this state class right over here, first thing what we need a reference to our entity class, which gonna sit on every enemy game object. So we need a reference of this, because inside this entity class we want to do some special things, so that's why we need a reference to it. So we will go to our state class, and inside our constructor, state constructor right over here, we're going to type this entity, and we can call entity just like that, entity, because we need a reference. And the second thing, we need a reference our animator component of this anime, because this anime just gonna have animator component. And if I go ahead and then play my game, you will see in the start of the game this anime just gonna play the animation clip of idle, because I already created animation clip, and I'm gonna show you. So that is the reason we also need a reference to our animator component of this anime inside that constructor, which is state. And you will see, and as soon as we can notice our game started, this anime is just playing the ideal animation clip over again and again. And if I select my boss anime or this anime in the hierarchy, move over to my animator tab, you can see I have all of this animation clip. We have ideal boss, hard boss, work boss, death, a player detected, and all of this you can see. See, and if you want to create this animation clip, then of course I will have a video in the description. You can go and check it out. And I'm gonna get autoplay mode. So if I select my boss anime in the hierarchy, go over to inspector, as you can see we have the animator component. So we also need a reference to this animator component so we can switch our animation of this anime. So let's pass inside this state constructor so we can switch our animation. So comma, second thing we're gonna pass our animator. So we need to type this the type of that component, which is animator, and now we have to name it. So let's call it animator. And also we need a parameter name of that you can simply say to switch our animation clip. Let's suppose we want to move over to this work boss, means that our let's assume that this anime need to play the work animation clip of itself. So however we need we need a parameter name which just gonna do the thing if we just make a transition between them. So we also need a parameter name, and that will be bool type, just like that. So as a third argument we can pass our the animator name, sorry, the name of the parameter, which will be responsible for for like playing the working animation clip, playing the attacking animation clip of our anime. So as a second argument we can pass, so string, that will be string, and it can be something like ideal or just like that. So we can call it something like anim bool name. And later on we need to replace this with our real thing. Basically we need to replace this entity with our entity class, and we need to replace this animator with our animator component, means we need to drag the reference of this animator component. And the third argument, which is animable, the parameter name, and this is necessary to switch to basically to set the parameter and name. And the third argument we will pass our state machine, because we also need to switch our state. This enemy need to play the attack state, means attack thing. It's need to patrol around this ground. So we also need a reference to our state machine class, which is responsible for switching our which will be responsible for switching our animation clip. So if I navigate to my state machine script, so this class will be responsible for switching our animation clip. So that is the reason we also need a reference of this state machine class, so we can just switch our animation states, state machine, or simply you can assume state. So let's go over to our state class, and as a third argument we're gonna pass our state machine. So we need to type this state machine, and then we can call it something like state machine with non as s capitalized later. So now we just pass our entity, we pass animator, we just pass anim bool name and the state machine. And we also gonna pass one thing, which will be a entity data, and we need to create that. But we're gonna take a look on the next lecture or later. So now what we have to do, we need to go to top of our class, and now we need to create this. We need to create our entity, we need to create our animator, so we can set inside this constructor. So what we basically have to do, come to the top of your class and make a protected. So instead of making public or private, we just made it protected. It means that we can just reuse, or we can access this parameter inherited classes. So we're gonna inherited classes. Let's assume we're gonna have the ideal state. So ideal state just gonna inherit from this state class. So it means that our ideal state class just gonna get access all of these things. We can reuse this do we can reuse this interstate function, we can reuse exit function, and we type it protected. It means that we can just access this parameter to our inherited classes, and we just assume it our ideal state class, so we can just access this parameter. But however, we're not gonna able to access this parameter through another script or another C# class, and we only gonna able to access it inherited class. So that is the reason we just made it protected, and that will be entity type and entity, because we need a reference to our entity class, and we can call it entity just like that, entity, and close that up with semicolon. And then we also need our reference, so to our animator. So we're gonna make our protected animator, and the component we're looking for is a animator, so let's call it animator just like that. And then we also need the animal name, so let's create a protected a string, and this will be anim bool name. So we can call it something like anim bool name just like that. And we also need the state machine, so we're gonna make a protected state machine, let's call it state machine just like that, and close that up with semicolon. And now what we have to do, we just need to set this. So what we will do, we just gonna set this dot entity, equal to our entity, and this dot entity means referencing this entity, and we setting that equal to this entity means that we just taking this entity class and we just putting inside that constructor. You can see basically we just setting that, as you can notice, this dot entity equal to our entity, making meaning that we just taking our entity class and then we just putting inside this constructor, you can see. And now we're gonna do the same thing, so we will pass our this dot animator equal to our this animator. So let's set equal to our animator, and let's close that up with semicolon. And now we're gonna set this dot anim bool name, sorry, anim bool name, name equal to our anim bool name, anim bool name. And one thing we also need, which is the state machine, so we will say our this dot state machine equal to our state machine, means we just taking our state machine script, which we have it over here, and we just putting inside this constructor, you can see. So now we just set this dot entity equal to our entity, and this dot animator equal to, we just set our animator, and this dot anim bool name we just set anim bool name, and this dot state machine we just set this state machine. Means that we taking all of those things and we just putting inside this constructor, you can see. And we're gonna close that. We just need to do these things, and also we're gonna create one more thing to just keep track of when we when we started inside this state. Means let's suppose we're gonna create the ideal state later on, we do know. So when we started into the idle or the move state, means that this enemy is moving or playing idle, so we need to keep track when we started or when we started into that state. So that's why we're going to create another protective parameter which will keep track of it. So we're gonna make it somewhere around here. Let's make it anywhere. It's not necessary to do it. I'm just doing it right here. You can simply copy mine, or you can just go with yourself as well. So I'm gonna make a protected, and we're gonna call this one sorry, this will be float type, and we will call this start time or start time, just like that we can call it, or a start time state. let's call it instead start time state to make it even more reasonable. So we just created a parameter called start time state, and now what we will do, we just need to set the time when we started our state, and we created this enter state function in order to enter to that state, that specific state. It can be idle, it can be move, it can be attack, it can be look for player, it can be charge, and the list just goes on. So when we when we iterate that state, now we're gonna set our start time state equal to our time dot time, and time dot time over here means the time when we started into our state. So we just taking that time means when we started or entered to that state, and we just put it inside this start time state. As you can see, now we have the time when we enter it to that specific state. And also what we need to do, we need to set the bool parameter. Let's suppose we want to play the ideal animation clip. So we're going to create a bool parameter for that inside this animator component. You can see inside unity editor. So in this situation, when what we need to do, so when we're gonna enter to that state means we need to play that animation clip, so we need to set the bool parameter. So in order to set the bool parameter, we basically have to need to move over to this animator component of this anime, means that we need to move over to this animator that we created over here, and then we can set the bool parameter. So when we enter to that specific state, and let's assume we just want to move over to our move state, so we need to set the move parameter or that parameter to true. So we will go to animator component, and then we're going to use this dot set bool function in order to set bool. And this bool function, as a first argument, it's going to take the it's going to take the parameter name. So we will pass our anim bool name that we created over here. So that is the reason we just created this parameter. So we're going to pass as a second argument, and later on we can replace this anim bool string parameter with quotation like ideal. We can replace with move depending upon which state we just want to enter it. If we enter it move state, it means that we need to set the move parameter, or we're gonna create a parameter for that. So as a first argument, we will pass our animal name, and the second thing comma, it's gonna take the value. So we're gonna set it to true because we want to play that animation clip, means we just need to check it, or we need to set it to true. But once we exit our state, it can be from any state, it can be idle, it can be from move, attack, or charge. So what we need to do now, we need to set that parameter to false because we just exit that state. Means we need to set that parameter to false. So now we will go to animator component once again, and then we're going to use that dot set bool function. And this bool function, we do know it's going to take the parameter name as a first argument, so we're going to pass our anim bool name, and the second thing comma, it's going to take the value, so we're going to pass our false because we just want to we just don't want to play that animation clip once we exit to from that state. Means we want to play another animation clip, so that is the reason we're just going over to animator component. You can simply assume that we just going over to this animator component of this anime, and then we using that bool parameter in order to set the bool. So I hope you get the idea. And now what we have to do, we're gonna press down control s to save our script. And now we will move over to unity editor, and we will quickly open up our state machine script, which will be responsible for switching our state. So just wait a moment. So we will open up our state machine script, which just gonna take care of to change our state. So let's open that up. So we need a reference to our state class, so we can switch our states. It can be idle, it can be move, it can be attack, it can be charge, and it just goes on. And I just showed the diagram. You can see we're gonna have entity, state, and state machine script. So let's go over to our state machine script. Let's open that up quickly. And now this state machine class, it's gonna take care of switching our state. So we need a reference to our this state class, so we can switch to any state we would like to switch with. So we need a reference, so we're gonna make a private, we can make it public instead, so let's make it public. And we need our state script or state, and let's call it something like current state. We can call it current state, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So let's make two function, and the first function will be initializing our state, means that once when we're gonna start our game, which state we just want to initialize in the start of our game. And the second function will be responsible for switching our state. So let's make a public, and make sure you just making it public, so we because we just want to call it from another class on another script, so we just need to make it public. For function we're gonna type void, and let's call this function initialize, just like that. Initialize, initialize, initialize state, let's call it. And let's make first argument first bracket and some curly brackets. And this function initialize state, it will take a state, which state we really want to initialize, or we just want to set in the start of the game. So we need a reference to our state once again. Basically it's gonna take the state argument, state class argument, because we need to switch or we need to initialize. So we're gonna make, we will pass our state, and we can call it a starting state. So let's call it starting state, just like that. And later on we need to replace this with our real state. It can be idle, it can be move, it can be attack, it can be charge, and the list just goes on. So now what we're gonna do now, we're gonna set our current state. Current state means that we're just moving whatever state we have. We just gonna set equal to our starting state. And now let's close that up with a semicolon. And after doing that, our setting our current state equal to our starting state, and now we just need to enter to that state. Enter to that state, it can be idle, it can be it can be move state, it can be attack, and you do know what's going on. So we will go to our current state by now, and now we're going to use dot enter state, and let's close that up with semicolon. Means that we're just going over to what is a state we just initializing in the start of the game. And after setting it, we just calling the enter state function. Means that we just going over to this state class, and then we just calling the enter state function. And this enter state function just keeping track of the time when we enter it to that state, and then setting the parameter, bool parameter of our animation clip. Means that we will play the animation according to which state we going over to. And now we also need a one more function to change our state. And to change our state, let's create another function, and we're gonna make it public because we have to call it from another class. And for function we're gonna type void, and let's call it change state, just like that. Let's make first bracket and some curly bracket. Also this over here, it's gonna take our state class argument, because we need to go over to, or we need to change our state. So that is the reason we need a reference to our state class. So let's pass our state, and we can call it something like new state. So let's call it new state. So first thing what we need to do, whatever state we are currently in, we need to exit from that state. And then after we can set our current state to this new state, and then we can enter to that state. So the first thing we need to exit which state we are in. So we will go to our current state, and then we're gonna use dot exit state, and then close that up with semicolon. Make sure you just call the function, and now we just exited from that state, or that it can be idle, move, anything, just like that. And now we're gonna set our current state equal to new state, and then close that up with semicolon. And now what we have to do, we need to enter to that state after setting it. So we will go to current state, and then we're gonna use once again enter state, basically calling the function. Means that we're just going over to this state class. You can simply assume the first thing we just calling the exit state function. And what this function is doing, you can see we're just setting the parameter to false, means we're not gonna play the animation clip which state we are currently in, because we just exiting. And after doing that, we just setting the current state to our new state, as you can see whatever state we just would like to change with, and then we just entering to that state. It can be idle, move, and the list just goes on. Means that we just going over to state class once again, and then calling this enter state function, and we do know what it's really doing. So I hope you get the idea that how you can create these three different classes to just set your state. And make sure you close that off with semicolon and arrange it. And I'm gonna press down control is on my keyboard, and I'm gonna talk about in the next lecture about this that how you can create the child state.